Welcome back to another episode of Bourbon, Barbecue, and Beer. If this is your first time joining us, I'm the host, Brad Moody. I'm glad you guys are along for the ride today. We're going to do one of my favorite cooks. I've got a whole ribeye that we're going to break down. I've dried aged it for over 60 days. I'm going to take you through that whole process, show you how I do it, and how I get each steak done, and how I don't waste any of this meat. It's such a good cook. At the end of that, we're going to take this stuff out to the grill, do my favorite piece of actually cooking it and eating it. I can't wait to share this with you guys. All right, so here is our dry aged prime roast here. It's been aged a little over 60 days, I think about 64 days. It's been in the steak ager drying. The one thing that I really love about using the steak ager is that it's got that UV light in it. And so I know all this pellicle and everything that we're about to take off and prep this roast with is going to be usable. And so in the description below, I'm going to have a link that'll take you where I actually use the pellicle, and we're gonna make a hamburger meat out of the pellicle along with some other meats, and we're gonna blend those together to have our own custom burger meat that's just absolutely dynamite. It has a depth of flavor that you won't find in any burger anywhere else. You can tell right here, right, how the depth of that's outside has actually concaved in, right, from that dry aging process. So throughout that entire process, you're losing a ton of moisture content from this meat, which is one of the reasons why it costs so much if you want to go out and get your dry aged meat, is the fact that there's just not as much of it there. So price per pound goes up because that moisture content isn't in the meat anymore. This product right here, you probably wouldn't be able to just find it anywhere because it is 60 days. But I looked around, and for me in my local markets, at 28 days of the dry aging process, this goes for about $50 a pound, believe it or not. That's how valued this meat is and the dry aging process is. I'm also going to do a video on the steak ager so that way you guys can make a decision for yourself if it's a product that you want. Right now the original steak ager is about $240, but like I said, with a cut like this, I mean, you do 2 dry ages and it pays for itself, right? So this is how you get restaurant quality meat at your home, right? Those high-end restaurants and steakhouses that you go to, they use dry aged products, right? Not wet aged, they use dry aged products. And so this is the outcome of that. So I already cut part of the meat off on one of the end caps over here. That was part of the knife video, right, that I just did. There's a link to that in the description below if you want to check out the knives, but you're going to get to see all those knives right here as we break this piece of meat down. So the very first cut that I'm going to make is across the end cap. Now again, I want to make sure that I'm coming a good bit back here into this cap because again, it's concaved back, and so the pellicle usually runs anywhere from 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch deep in this meat. You can see here on this one, it may be even a little bit deeper than that, although there are some holes in this end cap here that really brought that depth back even further. So we're going to cut probably about 1/2 inch right here to see if we can get all the way back, although I don't think that's going to be a deep enough cut because of the concave right here to get all of that. But that's where we're going to start, and then we can always do more from there. What you don't want to do is cut too deep, right? It's almost like construction work, right? If you're gonna cut anywhere and be wrong, you wanna be wrong long. You don't wanna be wrong short, right? You can't go back and put it back together. You can always trim off a little bit, but you can never come back, right, and really add back to it. So this is always a great moment of truth. Look at that right there. Guys, I'm sorry you're not here to share this with me today. It's going to be an amazing cook. So you can see how tight that meat has got. This nice fat cap really has protected a lot of this meat. Here, you see a little bit of this pellicle around the edge. What I'm going to do is actually cut these up and get prepared to cut around the edges. I know some people will actually trim the outsides and then they get their cuts. But for me, I think it's a lot easier process for me to go ahead. I'm gonna measure out exactly how many steaks I want to get out of this. I want to get at least 6 steaks. That's my goal, is to get 6 nice steaks out of this. And so I'm going to cut for those 6 steaks, and then I'll trim up the pellicle that's on the outside part once I have all my steaks done. So I think that for me is a little bit easier than sitting here trying to fight around the entire edge here, right? I wouldn't use my slicer, I'd use my chef knife for those cuts, but to actually peel all that back, I'd rather just go ahead, get my cuts out, make everything look great there, and then go around and trim each one up. Because then I can use my chef knife, I can get in there with a paring knife and do some finer detailed work, right, around those edges, and keep as much of this meat as I can. Remember how valuable this meat is. At 50 bucks a pound, I want to be cooking as much of this as I can, right? I don't want to lose any of it that I'll have to lose in the trimming process, right? So on the other side, I didn't get quite as deep as I needed to, right? You can see there's still a lot of pellicle here. So we're gonna cut a little bit deeper here along this edge and see where we start to get towards that meat. You can just see, I mean, how much of that dry aging process has taken effect and just really taken all the moisture out of this cut, right? See, we're almost there. There it is. All right, I think I'm getting pretty close here. So what I'll do is probably cut another 1/8 of an inch or so off, right, of this piece here. And that ought to get me to where I can start measuring across, right? Again, I want this side here, which the smaller side, you're always gonna have to cut a little bit more, right? Because more of the air was exposed to the lesser amount of meat, and so it really sucks through that moisture quickly, right? We're on the fatter side of the cut, right? You don't have to go back as deep because it is thicker and air can't get into this portion of the meat as easily because it's so well protected, right? On this side, there's not as much of that meat protecting, so we got to go a little bit further back than we do on the other side. So we'll give this one more cut here. Yeah, that's where I want to be right there. So I'm now going to start measuring this piece out here for what we have on this roast. And again, I said I wanted to get about 6 steaks out of this. Okay, so I'm going to grab something to measure with, right? And then we're gonna measure this out and see how big this is and see how thick of a cut we can get out of these steaks. Right, so I got a tape measurer here, right, to go ahead and we can measure this thing out and see what we got. So for me, that's 8.5 inches across here, probably a little less across this back end. It's hard to get those exact straight cuts, about 8.25 across the back side of it. So that 8.5 inches comes out to about 1.4. I was hoping to get about 1.5 inches for the ribeye. I usually like an 1.5 inches thickness on my ribeyes. But I can deal with them being a little bit smaller than that, especially since they're dry aged. They should still cook at a fairly good temp and still give us great, excellent flavor. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to place this across, and right at that 1 1/4 mark, right, I'm just gonna make a little mark and just score it right there. Again, looking at about 2.5, maybe just a little bit more here, right? Score that there. 3 3/4, just a touch over right here. Now we're looking at about 5 inches, which will be that cut right there, right? 6 1/4. We'll go just a little more here, and then split this last one up. And I'll end up with a 7th one. And this piece right here, right? That little piece there at the end, I'll probably add in towards my burgers, just depending on how much of this extra here I really get to. What I may end up doing is just cutting just a little bit, right, a little hair off of those initial marks as I go down. This side over here was the shorter side, right, and so it has a little bit more of that pellicle down here at the bottom than maybe what I want to use, and so I'll tighten those cuts up towards that end just to be able to make sure that down here where I know we got really good meat at a really good rate down here, I'll make sure that those cuts are nice and thick, getting closer to what it is that I wanted. And so I'll use my slicing knife to start this thing off, and we'll come straight down right next to that cut. Boom. Just like that. Right there, there's steak one. Steak two. Look at that. Steak three is free. Steak four. We'll split this one right down the middle. Check that out. How good do those things look, right? So now we've got all our cuts, right? We got the 6 steaks that we were hoping to get out of this. Now it's time to trim them up, right, and get rid of all this pellicle that we see on the outside. We want to get rid of some of that. Some of this darker flavor down here is fine, right? But it's that waxy coat that runs right along here, right, that we want to get rid of that, okay? So we're going to break out the chef's knife and we're going to get to work on that. So one thing that I like to do whenever I'm getting into these cuts, if I'm saving my trimmings, I like to bring along a Ziploc bag, right? And I'm going to put all this pellicle over here into that Ziploc bag to kind of give me a little bit more room to work on each one of these steaks here. So I can just set that off to the side, right? And really focus on each cut. And give it that attention that it deserves, right? I mean, we've been waiting a long time. These cuts are not cheap, right? So we want to give it all the attention that it deserves. And so I like to start right along that front, trimming off. And then you don't have to get perfectly round, right? Cuts around there. I can come back and get those as we go. What I really want to make sure is that I'm getting all that pellicle right there off of the meat. So I'm left with just the really good stuff. Again, with this being towards that end cap, that usually takes a little bit more to get through all that pellicle than you'll see once we start to get into these other cuts. Because it was exposed to the air so much and more of that moisture content was removed. So, and once you've done this, I mean, this is my 4th time, I think, doing ribeyes. you kind of start getting a feel for it, right? If it feels a little tough, right? If it's got a little waxy feel to it, the meat itself is going to have a little bit of waxiness to it already. Okay, so that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking more of a thick, waxy feeling. This is more, it almost feels a little bit like a film, right? But imagine when you first buy that steak, right? And how thick and juicy that feel is. It's now really condensed down, and so that's what you're feeling here. But the piece that I'm really looking for, right, is that thick wax, almost like a candle, right? So you're gonna feel a little thin film, and that's perfectly fine. What you don't want is a thick wax feel like a candle. Okay, so I'm feeling it a little here, so I can make this cut here at an angle to just try and get rid of just the pellicle. I don't want to keep shaving off huge pieces from this cut, right? Because it's really starting to thin up. So just making sure as I feel around that I don't feel any of that hard buildup. You will feel it in the fat. The fat, guys, the fat's like butter. Right? When you feel this fat, it's gonna feel like butter. It's also going to melt like butter. And you wanna talk about good eating. Man, that fat that's been dry aged, that now has that deep umami flavor in it. Again, it's like smoke rings. You can't fake it, right? There's no way to fake it. You got to actually do the work, right? The same thing here with this dry aged meat. Man, you can't fake that meat. You can't fake the taste of this fat going into this meat, the way that it's going to cook out. You just nice flat piece there. Corner it off. Usually come back, make that one little cut there. Right, same on this side. That little piece right there to give it that round form, right, on that ribeye. And this one I can already tell the back part of this is indented. And so it's going to be harder to get a cut from this side. So I'll just wait till I get to the other side there. But the top, right, is the opposite way. So it's going to be easier to make my cuts for the top of this steak along this side, right? And you'll just get a feel for it as you go, right? If you've never done this before, don't be scared of it, right? You're not going to mess this up, okay? The worst thing that's going to happen is that you cut it a little bit deep into the meat. Right? Or maybe it doesn't have that perfect shape that you wanted it to. But you know what people aren't talking about when they're eating this thing? The shape of it. I promise you that much. Right? They're way too far in deep with the flavor and just how powerful that beef flavor has gotten into this to be looking and talking about the shape of it. All right? You will get better every single time that you do this. I promise you, you will get better every time that you make these cuts. And the more that you use your knife, the better off you're gonna get at this stuff as well, right? And a lot of it is feel game, right? Like, I'm not perfect at this stuff, right? I'm gonna have to go back. I'm gonna have to make some trim ups and things like that. It's not gonna be exactly every single one the way that I want it, right? But I'm learning it too, right? I'm working hard at getting my steaks the way that I want them as well. So don't feel intimidated by this process at all, okay? This is easy, easy, easy. These are a little bit more difficult, right? Again, when you're getting to that point where it has that little rounded edge to it, right? And you're trying to just keep that out. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Does not have to be perfect. We just want to get that pellicle off that outside, right? And that's the biggest piece, is getting that pellicle off, because it really doesn't cook or render for you, okay? When we're gonna be out there grilling, it's just not gonna do what you want it to do. It will once we grind it. And that's why we're gonna take this pellicle and we're gonna take it and make burgers out of it, is because it really does break down once it's ground. But not until then. But this right here is one reason. That cut is why I go ahead and cut my steaks, right, into pieces, because look at the texture on this. Imagine trying to peel off the texture of that pellicle on a whole roast, right? And then look at the cut that I end up with because I cut my steaks first. Right? That's why I like to go ahead and cut them out. I mean, this is a prime piece right here that just shows you everything. I mean, nice rounded edge, flat, shooting down, right? Flat edge across the bottom, right? With that nice piece of fat on the back end that's gonna cook, give us a lot of flavor whenever we throw it onto the grill. Last piece, again, an end cap. Right? Remember, your end caps are going to be the most challenging. So if it's your first time, maybe you want to save your 2 end cap pieces for the end. Maybe that'll help you out. Right? Maybe you'll feel a little less intimidated. Go into the middle. Right? Find something that looks a little bit more like this. Right? You can already tell which side was facing out. Right? This is definitely the end cap side. Right? You can tell just by the movement of all the fat. Right? The color of it. You can tell. So maybe start interior and then work your way back out. If you, now that I got the paring knife out, right, and just feel around a little bit, right? One cool thing about this meat, man, is because it's so much, got a little bit of this tightness up here, because it's so much like butter, man, sometimes those little jagged edges that you thought you had, when you come back to check them, they're not there anymore. Like, it's just rounded out, super smooth, right? I mean, it almost is like glue, right? How about that one, guys? Right? I think this one's pretty much ready to go. This feels great. See, I can tell right here by looking at it, at the base of it, right here, that this piece should probably come off, but it's just sticking so tight to it. Like, why mess with it? Right? Why mess with it? Right, I'm gonna take this line up of steaks right now. I'm gonna put this into a Ziploc bag. I wanna go ahead and make sure that no more air gets to this right now. Right, I've lost all the moisture content that I wanna lose out of these things. It's a little after 1 o'clock. I'm gonna be putting these on around 5, maybe about 5:30. And so for that time, I don't want it just sitting in the fridge open. All right, I want to put these back into a Ziploc bag now that they're trimmed up, ready to go, so we can be ready for this. Again, I'm going to take all this pellicle, and I'll show you exactly how much pellicle we got here. This is a gallon Ziploc bag, and that's how much of it we got. Right, so that's a good bit of pellicle that is filled up. And again, this is why this dry aged stuff, man, costs so much. But we're not gonna let that meat go to waste. All right, so let's go ahead. We're gonna jump downstairs. I'm gonna let these things set for a little bit. Then we're gonna set them up. It's gonna be really simple setup. Throw them on the grill, fire that thing up, and let's eat some dry aged steak, man. I'm so excited. This is my favorite day. All right, guys, so we're out here on the Big Green Egg. I just got it set up. A couple of tricks for you whenever you're trying to get high heat. That's my real goal today, is to get this grill just as high as I can possibly get it. So a few things that I did is I take out all of the old charcoal. That's the first thing that I do. I want to put brand new charcoal in. Today we're actually going to be cooking with the Big Green Egg's own charcoal product. I don't use it all the time. It's a bit expensive, but I put it in the description below if you want to give it a shot. I also use a lot of other different charcoals as well. Today we're going to try this one because I really want this to be as natural in flavor as I can possibly get it. I also use an electric starter here. Again, I don't want to use fire cubes or anything else. I know maybe it doesn't leave a flavor, and science has proved that it doesn't. But I'm just, in my own mind, I already know, right? So this is the fire starter that I use. I also want to make sure that I get everything completely cleaned out so that way the air can circulate as much as possible to really get that temperature up as high as it can get. It also gives me an opportunity to make sure that I can move all of my inserts around to make sure that those airways are clear, that there's no clogs or anything like that in any of the holes in any of the places within those inserts. If you have an egg, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've got a Lion grill over here that I could have done it on, but I really think that this green egg really gets it screaming hot. I also want a little bit of that smoke flavor on these steaks as we get them done as well. The only thing we're going to season them today with is some salt and pepper, and that's going to be it. I'm going to put them out here. I'm going to let them set up here in just a minute. Got the fire going. We're going to get this thing up to temp, and we're going to start cooking. So as you can see here, starting to get really good temp. We're up over 550. Going to crack this thing open real quick. Take a look in here, right? I also use a wood grill scraper to really clean off the grill before I start as well. Again, I don't use a metal one because those metal ones can actually leave some filings on the grill itself, and so using a wood tool like this is really preferable to me than to use a metal scraper that can leave those filings around. So we're just about ready to go. The steaks are setting up real nice. About to throw them on the grill right now. All right, so we got the grill up at about 600 degrees. We're gonna slow crack this open. Make sure anytime you're doing high temp stuff that you always burp your egg. Look at that right there. So we're gonna put one on first. My wife wants hers well done, so we're gonna give her a smaller one. We're gonna go ahead and throw that one on first, right? Check that out. We're gonna let that sit. We're gonna give that one probably a 2-minute, 3-minute head start on everybody else's. So here we have the finished product. You can see down here is our well done steak, and we've got the rest that are going to be about medium rare here. You can tell how much of this fat really started dripping off real quick. That's a one trick whenever you're working with dry aged steaks. You really want to watch those flare ups. Make sure that they don't get too far out of hand whenever you're cooking them. So your cook times may actually be less than normal because of all the flare ups and things like that. It can get really hot around that steak, but it creates for a great sear, as you can tell. So we're gonna go inside, cut these things open, and get to eating. So here we are at my favorite part. It's been 60+ days. A very quick cook. Doesn't take very long to cook these off, especially if you've got a grill that'll get up to 600+ degrees for you. You can cook these in just a few minutes. I've let this rest for about 10 minutes now, giving it plenty of time. You wanna let dry age meat, in my opinion, I believe that you wanna let this dry age meat rest a little bit longer than you would other meats. You really want it to absorb all that juice back into the meat as much as it possibly can, right? Because it's given so much out, you want to give it that opportunity to actually get down in there. So one of the first things that I do, you saw this fat right here, right? We'll go ahead and get rid of that now. It's not going to do us any good as part of the tasting, okay? But we'll go ahead and we'll slice this bad boy up, and we'll take a look at what all this work, all this patience has actually done for us. I can just tell you right now, man, it smells absolutely amazing. I'm really glad that I put it on to the big green egg. If you've got a charcoal grill, you definitely want to take that dry aged meat and put it onto that grill, okay? That's the one that you want to cook this on. Get that extra smoke flavor. You're already going to get that deep beef flavor, right, from it. But you want to have that opportunity to go ahead and get a little bit of smoke in it as well. Really deepen up that flavor, okay? So now that we're all cut up, let's take a look on the inside of what we got. How delicious does that look? I mean, for me, that's perfect. I know some people may want it a little bit darker than that. I like to have mine with red in it. When I say medium rare, like I want red in that center. I just don't want a little pink. Pink gets to medium for me. This right here is a perfect medium rare. I love the fact that we've got that deep red tone there in the middle. Nice char on the outside, and I'll show you my reaction as I take this first bite from these dry age steaks. So this is the absolute best part of this. We're actually gonna try a piece of this steak right here. I mean, just look at how tender that is. I mean, it just falls right apart as you touch it. Man, I'm telling you guys, you can't fake dry aging beef. You just can't do it. The depth of flavor, that beefy tone. You do have to be careful when you're cooking them, just because you don't want them to get too dark, right? It's not overly juicy, but man, there's enough juice still in here. Resting is the key. Making sure that you rest it a little bit longer than you normally would. And then again, not cooking it too much to where you lose all that juice. Man, and ribeye is just so tender naturally. This just really falls apart in your mouth. It's an excellent, excellent cook, I have to say. This is always my favorite, doing these dry age ribeyes. 60 days. I would say that the beef flavor is really brought out. I don't know if it's done a lot more than 28 days, to be honest with you. The taste is kind of similar. And so I don't know if maybe I should try 90 day or just settle on the fact that about 28 days is a good shot. And maybe that's where we should be with the aging process. Let me know in the comments below. What do you guys think? Do you think I should age them a little longer? Do you think 28 days is long enough? All I can tell you is that umami flavor that you get from this beef and just that extra tone. I mean, salt and pepper, that's it on this, guys, right? Let that beef shine through, and because it's been dry aged, I mean, the depth of that beef flavor is just unmatched. You can't go out and buy anything to put on it that'll make it taste this way. So I'm gonna go and enjoy the rest of this steak, right? You enjoy the rest of this video. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. If you really enjoyed it, go ahead and smash that like button for me. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and then knock on that bell right there next to it so that way you can get the next cook. Question of the day: what's the next thing that I should start dry aging? Go ahead and put that in the comments below. I'll start working on that so that way we can have that episode coming up for you soon. Until then, I'll see you next time.